Now, early this week, we told you that Viktor Gyökeres was given additional time off as he attempted to finalise his move to Arsenal. Well, he was scheduled to return to train today at Sporting Club in Portugal. So did that happen? Well, let's head to David Nova in Portugal for the very latest. David, I guess that's the key question. Any sign of Viktor Gyökeres at training today?
Hello, good afternoon. No sign of Gyokeres today, and I think there is not going to be any sign of him tomorrow. He was expected, or at least Sporting expected Gyokeres to arrive today, at least to sleep in Lisbon, so that he can be tomorrow at the breakfast with the other players. Sporting travels tomorrow to the south of the country, to Algarve, to make some trainings in some friendly games. But Gyokeres already informed Sporting that he's not going to show up neither today, neither tomorrow. So that's where things are now, unless things change suddenly, and we don't believe in that here in Portugal. I think not even Sporting believes that the player is going to change his mind. So no sign of him, and I think he's not going to return in the next couple of days. So things are going to be really tense now. Because he has a contract, he has to show up to training. It's his work, but the player's decision, maybe advised by the agents, is not to return to training.
OK, so do you sense there are more gears here, David? I mean, already we've got the situation, the tense situation, as you very accurately referred to it, between him and his club, and we know the powers that be at Sporting Club in Portugal, but also, you know, that Arsenal are keen and they're waiting. How hard do you sense he's going to push to get this move?
I think the player is going to push until the limit, the maximum. Gyokeres only wants Arsenal. That's his biggest dream, to play for Arsenal, for a Premier League club, to play Champions League. That's what Gyokeres wants. But the truth is, we were expecting that the deal could be done by now, since the difference is really small in terms of money. But that's more than that. That's about. It's more about the things that the player is doing, the agents are doing, and of course, Sporting is not really happy with this situation. Of course, the way the player is behaving, the way the agents are behaving, and that's the problem. So if Gyokeres doesn't show up in the next couple of days, I think that, of course, maybe he can face a fine, some disciplinary punishment, for example. We don't know that. I think not even Sporting knows that by now. But of course, in terms of the player's point of view, of course, I think he's going to do everything to push for the transfer. We just don't know how not showing up for training can help the deal. That's the big question mark here in Portugal. What the player is expecting by not showing up. If he's expecting the Sporting to agree the deal, I don't think that things are going to be done that way. To be honest,
David, let's talk just cold hard numbers here. What do you sense? What are you hearing in Portugal? What is that magic number that will get this deal over the line? And is there any fear, perhaps, that Arsenal, if they're not prepared to pay that number, they'll just simply walk away?
Well, the number from the last couple of weeks, also the Sporting's president spoke about that publicly. So Sporting wants 80 million, 70 at transfer with a transfer fee, plus 10 million in bonuses. So 80 million euros should be enough to make the deal. The information that we have here in Portugal, and we published that at Record Portugal, is that Arsenal is willing to pay 65 plus 15. So that's the difference of 5 million euros. Sporting wants Arsenal to raise a little bit the initial transfer fee, and maybe, of course, decreasing the amounts on the bonuses. That's where they are now. The strange thing here in Portugal, we are asking the same thing. Is why is not Arsenal just offering plus just 5 million euros? Is not a big thing in football. So And I don't know to be honest what's going to happen, because we are speaking 11th of July. We have a lot of days until the transfer window closing, but I don't know. There are other strikers in football, so of course Arsenal can be fed up with this situation and go for another striker. And Gyokeres needs to do another choice for his career. So I think it's going to be interesting days in the next weeks, or until the transfer window closes, of course.
OK, if this deal were to collapse, David, how might he fancy moving to Manchester United as the next move in his career, potentially?
Good question. We have the information here in Portugal that Gyokeres said no to United 3 times already in this transfer window. Of course, United is a big club. It's not about that, but he wants to play Champions League football. That's the thing, and United is not in the Champions League. So of course, he wants Arsenal, but. Like I said, imagine if things with Arsenal collapse and the player still wants the Premier League and the transfer window is almost closing. And if, of course, United wants a striker, that can be a reality. But by now, the player doesn't want to go to United just because of that Champions League thing. So things can change if the deal with Arsenal collapses, and we know that Arsenal has several targets for the attacking, Sesko and other players. They want Gyokeres as well, but I think that the key here is to understand the patience that Arsenal will have to wait for the player, and then let's see what can happen, because the player wants the Premier League. So if he's not going to play for Arsenal, he can play for another Premier League club. Who knows?
Now, more transfer news. Football correspondent Rob Dorset is here to fill us in on everything. Rob, Everton have seen Dominic Calvert-Lewin leave the summer, but is their striker replacement edging closer?
It looks that way. It's a priority for them, isn't it? And we've seen that Keith Downey's very busy up in the northeast. They've got a bit more northeast news to come for you in a moment from the other side of town, shall we say. But yeah, Tiano Barry is currently on his way to Merseyside from Villarreal. A big name. And somebody that Everton have been connected with for a while, and a lot of other Premier League clubs as well. He's due to have his medical as soon as he lands, before he completes what we expect will be a £27 million move to Everton. Very highly thought of. 11 goals, 4 assists in La Liga last season for Villarreal. And you mentioned Dominic Calvert-Lewin there leaving. I've been doing a bit of digging on his future, and there's a number of Premier League clubs that are interested in him right now and exploring possible deals for him. I think it's pretty rare that a striker of his quality becomes available, albeit one who's been really dogged with injuries in recent seasons. He's still only 28, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, so let's see what happens there. Also, Everton prepared to listen to offers for Beto, so there could be a lot of striker changes for Everton over the coming days, I think.
OK, you promised to take us to the other side of Merseyside. Let's go now and let's talk Liverpool. Talks about Darwin Núñez?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've heard a lot about Darwin Núñez, and Liverpool have made it pretty clear that they're prepared to listen to offers for him. And Sky Italy are reporting today that Napoli are prepared to pay £47.4 million for Darwin Núñez. That's an initial £43 million plus £4.5 million in add-ons in effect, and they're prepared to pay him £100,000 a week wages after tax, is what Sky Italia are reporting, which is big news. He's got interest from clubs in Saudi Arabia as well, but it sounds like Núñez himself prefers the idea of a move to Spain. So let's see what happens there. Connected with this, though, Victor Osimhen. Juventus are stepping up their efforts to sign him, we're told, from our colleagues at Sky Italy. He's a primary objective for them, as far as we understand, and negotiations have intensified over the weekend. But is this all connected, of course? Because Napoli, will they only allow him to leave if they can get Núñez in? Will they only progress a deal for Darwin Núñez if they think Osimhen to Juventus is happening? So it's one of those snowball effects, those domino effects that we see so often in the transfer market. Does one need to happen for the other to happen?
Yeah, can't lie, I really felt that after tax, the way you delivered it.
£100,000 after tax. You know, it's a decent deal for him, isn't it?
Crazy, crazy. Any other business?
Yeah, there's quite a few bits going on. It's bubbling away. Leeds, Gabriel Gudmundsson has completed his medical with Leeds, we understand. Left back from Lille, £10 million deal. We expect that to go through pretty soon from now. It'd be Leeds' fourth signing of the summer so far as they try and get a squad capable of staying in the Premier League. And we mentioned that Keith Downey's very busy up in the northeast, and I told you I'd talk about Sunderland. Well, it's an exclusive from our colleague Keith Downey. Reinildo Mandava has completed his Sunderland medical now. That's happened in Madrid, so he's not with the club yet, but he's agreed all the terms on a 2-year contract, so we expect him to come and join the rest of the squad perhaps later this week, and then that deal should go through as well. So we'll keep you posted on other bits and bobs. There's a few other things moving.
I will count on that. Thank you, Rob. Now, Arsenal are in advanced talks to sign Sporting Lisbon striker Viktor Gyökeres. Let's get more on this with Portuguese football journalist David Novo, who's based in Lisbon. David, great to be speaking to you today. What are the latest reports in Portugal about this deal?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Well, the latest news here, and we published that here today in Record Portugal, is that Sporting believes that there will be an agreement until the end of this week. Today is Tuesday, next couple of days, and there is that will be a relief for everyone involved. Because Gyokeres is supposed to return to training on Friday, and he doesn't want to return. He already informed the Sporting's president that he will not return to training. In fact, he was supposed to get back to training yesterday, and Sporting authorized him to only return Friday. Well, of course, we had the feeling here that both parts were gaining some time to get the deal closed. So that's the feeling here in Portugal from the club's point of view, also from the players' point of view. So we all believe here in Portugal that in the next couple of days, maybe until Thursday, the deal can be closed. That's the feeling. But of course, this deal has a lot of issues, some tense situations. So of course, we have to be careful with that, but that's the feeling here in Portugal now.
There's also been lots of reports about the fee. What do you know?
Well, the fee, it's all about the money. It's always about the money. But here, the problem since the beginning, it's about the money. The info that we have here in Portugal is that Sporting wants 80 million euros, 70 million upfront, plus 10 million in bonuses. And Arsenal is willing to pay 65 plus 15. So it's a small difference. It's a difference of 5 million euros. And I think that it's such a tiny difference. It's not going to make the deal collapse. But of course, Arsenal needs to give more money up front for the transfer fee to reach the 70 million and to decrease the amount of bonuses. That's what Sporting wants. They are not going to change their minds. Of course, we need to understand if Arsenal is willing to change the offer. We believe so. So that's where we are right now. A small difference of 5 million euros. So speaking of a business of this magnitude, 5 million euros is nothing. So that's why we believe that things are going to happen.
I think Arsenal have been impressed by how much Gyokeres wants this move to happen. Are the reports true he could even end up losing money?
Yeah, that's true. We published that yesterday at Record Portugal. Gyokeres gave up 2 million euros of his salary pack so that Arsenal could use that money to improve their offer. So, of course, we know that Gyokeres, of course, is going to earn a lot of money moving from Portugal to the Premier League. That's, of course, normal. But he gave another sign that he only wants Arsenal. He only wants the Premier League. That's why he gave up on 2 million euros. It's a considerable amount, so that Arsenal could use that money to improve the offer. So he only wants to play for Arsenal. That's the thing that we have for sure since the beginning. Gyokeres only wants to play for Arsenal.
David, I think his numbers have been quite staggering. 97 goals in his 2 seasons at Sporting. Do you expect him to hit those kinds of numbers with Arsenal?
Well, we all know that, of course, the Premier League, it's another level. It's top level. It's way better than the Portuguese Championship, of course. But I think that, of course, we have that feeling here in Portugal that Gyokeres is perfectly able to. I don't know if he's going to score that amount of goals, of course, but he scored for Portugal in the Portuguese Championship. He scored in the Champions League. He scored for the national team in the Nations League. So, of course, I think he's really up to the challenge. I think he's going to be a huge signing for Arsenal. And, of course, I think he's going to score a lot of goals in the Premier League.
Well, he scored 39 goals for Sporting last season, but quite a few of those were penalties. How much of and how big a part of his game is that?
A little bit, yeah. I think he never missed one penalty here in Portugal. So it's one of his weapons, so to speak. Of course, we all know that he's a really strong and physical striker. And basically, of course, the way that Sporting plays, of course, they have several penalties. Also because Gyokeres suffers a lot of fouls in a penalty box. So and usually that's him taking the responsibility to score those penalties, and he never missed. So of course it's one more of his weapons, of course, but it's not just the only one. Of course, I think he has a lot of qualities, and the penalties are just one of them.
What about his work rate off the ball? Does that get spoken about enough? What can you tell us?
Not really, because it's normal. People, of course, speak about his goals. He scores a lot of goals. I think that's the most important thing, of course, for a striker. But he's a type of striker who likes to press the defenders, to make the offensive fouls when necessary. So if a manager wants to have a striker who is the first one to defend, Gyokeres can do it. I don't know if it's what Mikel Arteta wants, but of course he can do it. He's really physical, so of course he likes to go on duels with the defenders, also in terms of defensive playing. So of course it's not speaking enough just because he scores a lot of goals, and I think that's why people tend to speak about Gyokeres, about the goals, and that's what we ask for a striker.
Let's stick with London clubs now. Crystal Palace have held talks over the signing of Sporting centre-back Ousmane Diomande. What are the reports in Portugal about this deal?
Good question. There are different reports here in Portugal. We have us at Record Portugal. We had information that the clubs talked with each other, of course. But Sporting wants 60 million euros, and the Crystal Palace was willing to offer just 30 million, half of the price asked for Sporting. So of course the negotiations ended at that time, because there was a huge difference between them. So I don't know if Crystal Palace is going to raise the offer, but Sporting only wants 60 million, so it's a lot of money, and I don't know. And the last days we didn't have any updates on that, but it's difficult to Crystal Palace to raise the offer and to offer the double. So I think it's a difficult deal to happen.
Let's focus on transfers, shall we? Damasheth is back alongside me. OK, let's rattle through some of these stories. Noni Madueke, what's the list on his future, Damash?
This one is developing, David, because we were told that Arsenal would probably approach Chelsea after the FIFA Club World Cup. Well, it's accelerating because Arsenal are now in talks with Chelsea over a move for their forward, Noni Madueke. Initial contact has been made between the two clubs. We expect those talks to develop. Madueke, significantly, is understood to be open to that move. Personal terms on a long-term contract, not expected to be an issue if a deal can be agreed, of course. So Arsenal now are pushing on with this deal for Noni Madueke. They are now in talks with Chelsea over the potential signing of the forward.
OK, so how might that affect their potential pursuit of Gyokeres? Because we know that Arsenal fans are excited about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, this is the question I've been asked since this news broke about Man Utd. Our information is, at the moment, it's not going to have an impact. That could change, clearly, but Gyokeres remains a primary target for Arsenal in this transfer window. Internal discussions are continuing at Arsenal over what their next steps are going to be, because the deal to bring in Gyokeres would require the triggering of a release clause. His release clause is £60 million plus £8 million in performance-related add-ons, which in total is £68 million. So if they were to meet that release clause, they can speak to Eze if Eze wanted to speak to Arsenal. However, if they want to negotiate on that release clause, then they would have to ask Crystal Palace for permission to speak to Gyokeres. Now, when you negotiate a release clause, some people immediately think it would mean trying to lower that value. Sometimes it can mean actually paying more than the release clause in return for favourable payment terms. But that is for down the line. At the moment, he remains a priority target for Arsenal.
OK, so Madueke, Eze, both great attacking threats, but neither of them an out-and-out striker, which is arguably what Arsenal need the most. So where are they at with that?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It has been for the last 3 or 4 transfer windows. Are Arsenal going to sign a striker? Well, talks are continuing between Arsenal and Sporting over their striker, Viktor Gyökeres. There is a gap in valuation that remains, with Sporting thought to want £69 million, including add-ons. Now, while the clubs, we think, aren't too far away from a compromise on an overall fee, it's thought that how much of that fee will be guaranteed up front is going to be key to getting this deal done. Arsenal are understood, though, to be encouraged and impressed by Gyökeres' desire to want to come to Arsenal. He has decided that that is where he sees his future career. 27 years old, his first taste of Premier League football, and he wants it to be at Arsenal. They have, though, Arsenal done due diligence on a number of other strikers, which you would expect, because if this deal cannot get done, because Sporting will dig their heels in, they will want the price that they feel is right for Viktor Gyökeres, then they will move on to other targets. It has been a complex one, this one, because there was all this talk about gentlemen's agreements between Viktor Gyökeres and the Sporting Lisbon president. And if Gyökeres stayed last season, which he did, he thought he could leave for less than £60 million. The Sporting Lisbon president was said that is not going to happen. Hence why they are looking for €70 million plus €10 million in add-on, which comes to around £69 million is what the asking price is.
OK, across North London, strikers also on the agenda for Tottenham Hotspur. What can you tell us on them?
Right, this one shouldn't come as a surprise, because the new Tottenham Hotspur head coach is Thomas Frank, formerly of Brentford, and he managed very well Johan Visser. And there is an interest in Johan Visser from Tottenham Hotspur. No official contact, we think, between the clubs. That could change soon, however. Tottenham, though, have been exploring the conditions of a potential deal, what it would take, financial-wise, to bring Visser to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Interestingly, Brentford are unlikely to want to allow Visser and mbeumo to leave in the same transfer window. So if Tottenham or another club were to get their hands on Visser, I just wonder if it will become increasingly difficult or problematic for Manchester United to try and get their hands on mbeumo. As far as Visser is concerned, he's got 1 year left on his contract, turns 29 in September. Tottenham Hotspur will probably think that they can get a reasonable deal given those parameters on his contract just now.
And I'm guessing United are keeping an eye on that situation whilst they continue to pursue bryanmbeumo. So where are we at with bryanmbeumo?
I think Manchester United will remain relaxed about their situation, simply because I think there's a cautious optimism that they can strike a deal with Brentford for mbeumo still. Like Arsenal and Gyokeres, United are discussing internally what they're going to do next. Their last bid was worth £62.5 million. It was £55 million up front, £7.5 million in performance-related add-ons. Now, overall, that is not too far away from what Brentford would want. We think that Brentford want around £65 million. However, it's going to be how that amount is going to be paid. So United would probably want to do that with performance-related add-ons in there, whereas Brentford, we think, want the majority, if not all, of that £65 million to be guaranteed, be it over 3 or 4 years, but they would want at some stage that £65 million to be paid by Manchester United. United are going to stay disciplined with this deal, as they are with most of their other transfers in this window. However, they do know that bryanmbeumo wants to come to Manchester United, and that could work in their favour when they're trying to do this deal. However, Brentford and their sporting director Phil Giles earlier on last month has actually told Sky Sports News that Mbeumo would be happy to stay at Brentford if this deal did not materialise. But he did admit that there is a deal to be done there. Personal terms, we think, are not expected to be a problem for Mbeumo.
Viktor Gyökeres will face disciplinary proceedings at Sporting after he failed to turn up to training today. Gyökeres was due back after the club gave him permission to delay his return. Arsenal have been in talks to sign the 27-year-old but haven't been able to reach an agreement with Sporting over a £69 million deal. Sporting are believed to want an initial £60.4 million plus £8.6 million in add-ons. Well, the Sporting president, Federico Varandas, had this to say: "We're calm. Everything can be solved with the closure of the market, a hefty fine and an apology to the group. If they don't want to pay Victor's fair market value, we'll be very comfortable with that for the next 3 years." If the geniuses who are devising this strategy think that this puts pressure on me to make it easier for him to leave, not only are they completely wrong, but they are also making it more complicated for the player to leave. No one is above the interests of the club, whoever they are.
Noni Madueke. He has been given permission to leave Chelsea's camp at the FIFA Club World Cup to pursue this deal with Arsenal. He's expected to have a medical with Arsenal very, very soon. I'll break down the deal for you. It has all been agreed. It's an initial payment of £48.5 million plus a further £3.5 million in performance-related add-ons. So in total, if he was to meet all of those performance-related conditions, the total cost of that deal could rise to £52 million. And he's already agreed in principle the terms on a 5-year contract with Arsenal. So this one is looking really, really close now. It looks like Madueke is going to be on his way back from the United States, back to the UK to take a medical with Arsenal. And we should see a formal announcement, all being well, in the next few days or so.
Arsenal fans jumping with glee at this one, Mark?
I think this is a really exciting signing. 23 years old, offers that versatility that Mikel Arteta likes from every signing, someone that can play in multiple positions. Dharmesh mentioned earlier on that having someone who could play as a right winger, and Arsenal perhaps lacked that bite and that spark when Bukayo Saka was injured last season, and Noni Madueke will certainly bring that. Just the 2 starts in the Club World Cup for Chelsea maybe was a little indication that he wasn't a part of the furniture moving forward. And when you look at the fee as well, it's very much in keeping with the other players that have moved over the course of this summer. It's all around £50 million, isn't it? You know, João Pedro 55 plus 5 from Brighton to Chelsea. Jamie Gitting's around 50 million as well from Borussia Dortmund. Anthony Elanga, when that one gets confirmed, from Nottingham Forest to Newcastle.
Yeah, the fees are also similar here, aren't they?
Yeah, 52 plus 3. So what you're seeing there is that's the market value for young players, young wingers that can be quite versatile in that front 3. And anyone under the age of 25, between 20 and 25, that's the kind of price you're going to be paying. So that's one of the things why clubs like to get business done nice and early, that if that bar is set a lot higher than perhaps they're comfortable with, they're not caught in that mould of being, well, we've got to pay that because that's what he's worth, because that's what he went for. And that's why you see some teams get their business done nice and early. But it looks like a really sensible piece of business for Arsenal, and I think he could be another one of those players.
This is what clubs are starting to do, though, because they are looking at the market value of certain players in that same position like Madueke. And Chelsea will have every right to say, well, if this player is going for this much money, then this is how we should value Noni Madueke at. It's the same with the whole Manchester United and bryanmbeumo, because Brentford are probably thinking they bought Matheus Cunha for £62.5 million. So I think that's where we're going to start pitching what we want for bryanmbeumo. But with regard to Madueke himself, make no mistake about it, this is not something Arsenal just thought about in this transfer window. They've kept an eye on his development now for the past couple of years in Madueke. Clearly, they've pinpointed areas in this transfer window where they need to strengthen. And I mean, Mark alluded to it there, something that happened last season when they had all of these injuries. And maybe they thought when Saka was injured, yes, they had Ethan Nwaneri, but he was just coming into the team. Did they have anyone else who could go into that position who had Premier League experience previously and who could keep Arsenal at relatively a good level as maybe Saka was keeping him at? But now that they're looking at all of these other players and filling in the number 2 goalkeeper position, they've got their 2 midfielders in Norgard and Martin Zubimendi, following the departures of Jorginho and Thomas Partey. They're starting to look at all of their squad and thinking, right, we found out where the holes are, let's fill them. And if you look at their squad strength now, Madueke, as Mark said there, can play on both wings. Add that to Gabriel Martinelli, Leandro Trossard, Bukayo Saka, Ethan Nwaneri, and you're starting to look at real strength in depth in those positions for Arsenal. Reece Nelson as well, he's still an Arsenal player.
How good of a move, though, is this for Madueke? Is he going to be going from a fringe player at Chelsea to a fringe player at Arsenal? Is he not a starter? Is that what we're saying?
No, I mean, he's going to have to fight for his place. I think Arsenal want to increase competition in every single area of that pitch. And because of his versatility, it won't just be a case of, oh, if Bukayo Saka's injured, then Noni Madueke is going to get a game, because he can play on the left-hand side as well. He's shown he's versatile. And another thing that he's shown is that he always seems to be fit and available for Chelsea. And he's been a regular for them. And he's won trophies with Chelsea as well. So I think I think there was a little bit of pushback on social media, depending on whether that's a good gauge or not, from some Arsenal fans thinking, is this a good signing or not? He's an England international.
What would you say to the Arsenal fans?
Listen, I think Mark said it all there, but the qualities of Noni Madueke, I think it is a good signing, if and when it does happen, and it will increase competition for Arsenal in those forward positions.
We have to start with Morgan Gibbs-White and that potential move to Tottenham. I came off set last night basically saying it's all on track, everything looks rosy. What's gone wrong?
What's gone right? It feels like for the last 24 hours for Tottenham Hotspur. Let's just clarify where we are as of last night, because that was the point, like you say, where things look good and this looked like this would be a smooth transaction from Nottingham Forest to Tottenham. Now, yesterday we said that Tottenham Hotspur had met the release clause, which we understand to be £60 million in Morgan Gibbs-White's contract. He was due to have his medical in London today. There were some reports suggesting he had travelled down to London, been given permission to do so because that release clause had been met. We know that he was a huge part of Nottingham Forest's successful season last year, where they finished 7th in the Premier League, 7 goals, 10 assists, huge part of Nuno's side. However, there's been a rather large spanner put into the works today, and it's all centring around this release clause.
What's gone wrong? What's happened?
Do you want to go? Shall I go? I tell you what. Let's go to what our reporter Rob Dorset was saying earlier on today, and he was trying to give as much clarity as he possibly could with regards to this situation. So, Nottingham Forest consider Morgan Gibbs-White's proposed move to Tottenham off for now. Sky Sports News has been told, whilst Forest consult their lawyers over potential legal action. Sky Sports News understand Forest have ceased all communication with Tottenham. Forest also believes Spurs made an illegal approach to the player and never granted permission for them to speak to him. Forest also believe there has been a breach in confidentiality around his release clause because Tottenham's bid was pitched at exactly the level of his release clause. It's not yet clear if Forest are able to block the transfer entirely. However, it is now expected to be delayed as Forest prepare a complaint to the Premier League. Forest have refused to comment to Sky Sports News, and Tottenham Hotspur also declined to comment when contacted.
OK. So
Does that make it more clear for you?
Well, slightly, but I'm wondering one thing, Dharmesh, because football's a small world. Everyone talks, agents, players, coaches, everyone talks, whether it's on the record, off the record, and then sometimes they talk to us as journalists as well. How can you keep something like a release clause confidential?
Depends, actually. It's a good question because there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to release clauses. I spoke to an agent earlier on today, and he tells me it all depends on how the release clause is worded in the contract. So it's basically an individual case-by-case basis. Now, if a release clause is confidential, let's just take that case first of all, then a club, if they wanted to buy a player, would have to approach another club to find out, A, if there is a release clause, and B, the value of that release clause. It can be the case that details of a release clause can be made available to an interested club via a representative if that was what was agreed when that contract was signed with the release clause incorporated within it. But if it is confidential, then there is still a club-to-club contact that would have to be made. Loosely speaking, look, it should work as easy as if there's a release clause and a club meets that release clause, then the player can go and talk to the club if he so wishes to go and talk to that club.
Which I thought was what happened.
But given the information that we've got today, this might imply that there might have been a confidential element to this release clause. Hence why Tottenham Hotspur would have had to have approached Nottingham Forest formally to look, we're interested in Morgan Gibbs-White. For example, I'm using this as the example. We'd be prepared to pay this much money. And it just so happens that the information that Rob Dorset was giving us today was effectively Tottenham Hotspur pitching their bid at exactly that release clause level, which is why Nottingham Forest have thought this doesn't sound entirely right, because we feel that this is confidential information that can only be gleaned from a club if there is club-to-club contact.
Right.
Some release clauses are under an NDA. So that release clause exists, but no one is allowed to know it.
NDA meaning?
Non-disclosure agreement.
Yes.
And there are some release clauses like Michael Olise at Crystal Palace, £50 million, Dean Howson at Bournemouth, £50 million, Matheus Cunha that went to Manchester United, £62.5 million. That is a public release clause. People know that, the agent's allowed to discuss that, but there are some release clauses the agent is not allowed to tell anyone, and it feels like, reading between the lines, this is one of those situations where that detail in the contract is not allowed to be told. That's written, but not said.
Okay.
And I think that's where Nottingham Forest's issue is.
And that's where they're disappointed with this approach. But I wonder whether we're just delaying the inevitable here, because, OK, I can understand Nottingham Forest are a little bit upset. Perhaps a confidentiality breach has taken place. But this move is going to happen anyway, Dharmesh?
It feels like it will happen, but there is going to be a delay now, clearly, because after yesterday's news, we were expecting this to accelerate pretty quickly. As you said, you came off air and was like, right, this deal's happening. But now we've got this situation where Nottingham Forest are not happy and they want some sort of... They want it looked into how Tottenham Hotspur have approached this. It's very difficult in transfers in particular to keep... You mentioned it before, everybody talks to everybody else. So it's how certain bits of information has been transmitted to certain parties and whether it was done in good faith or whether it was done where it shouldn't have been done.
We've seen cases where teams perhaps have known what the trigger clause, the release clause is, when there necessarily hasn't been club-to-club contact, Mark, and so they've bid just a little bit higher to prove that they didn't know what the release clause was.
The famous one was Arsenal and Luis Suarez at Liverpool.
Yeah.
We understand it was anything over 40 million would have triggered the opportunity for the player to speak to the club, and Arsene Wenger very famously bid 40 million and £1, which was the release clause, so they were entitled to speak to the player. It never ended up happening. But yeah, and sometimes you have release clauses. For example, Neymar Jr., when he went from Barcelona to PSG, that had to be paid in full. So it was a cheque for €220 million on the table from PSG to La Liga. We are paying your release clause. Other release clauses, as Darmesh alluded to, they can be unique to that particular deal. It could be 3 payments over 18 months of X, 3 equal payments. Every release clause is ever so slightly different, and it's one of those situations we try and gather as much information, but ultimately the club can do nothing if that is contractually written between the two parties. If you pay X, Y, and Z in these kind of payments, in this kind of timescale, there's nothing we can do about it.
That's the case with Matheus Cunha. So Manchester United knew it was £62.5 million, but the conditions of that release clause were they pay a third of it immediately, they pay a third of it next summer, and the summer after that they complete that £62.5 million payment over 3 instalments. Now, you said before, sometimes clubs go above the release clause, and people were saying, why would you pay above the release clause? Well, sometimes clubs will try and say, you know what, we're willing to pay you, say it was £62.5 million for Cunha. I was told at the time that Manchester United were not only exploring the deal as the conditions set out that Wolves had, but they were also exploring potentially paying above £62.5 million in exchange for more favourable payment terms. Because in this world of PSR, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit more later in the show, you have that situation where the £62.5 million won't come out of Manchester United's account straight away. It will be the first instalment. So if they can spread a slightly higher payment over, say, 4 instalments, then that 20 odd million pounds that they're paying at the moment, that would be reduced per year, and that would help them per financial year in their PSR calculation.
I bet you all didn't know that you were going to become experts in
I'm finally using my economics degree.
releases.
I did an economics degree, finally using it.
There you go.
Yeah.
My brain is whirring. Okay, that's all as it is. There's nothing we can do about that. We have to wait for the legal process to play out. But what does this mean in terms of Spurs now? So they want their player as soon as possible. They got a pre-season tour to go on.
They might just have to be patient. Like Darmesh said, you get the feeling this will happen. However, they may just have to wait a little bit longer to just clear up things legally and make sure they're in a comfortable position, because the last thing they want to do is be dragged through the courts throughout the course of the next few weeks and months and so on and so forth. They don't want to make it uncomfortable for the player. They just want to get the players in the building, focus on this brand new era at Tottenham Hotspur with Thomas Frank, who's an exceptional coach. I'm really excited to watch his new look Tottenham team, which obviously he wanted Morgan Gibbs-White to be a part of. So it'd be fascinating to see how it develops. But ultimately, it's out of everyone's hands, apart from the key 2 or 3 people at the table. And there'll be a lot of lawyers involved as well at this moment.
A lot of lawyers charging a lot of money.
Right, some breaking transfer news to bring you in regards to Arsenal and their pursuit of a striker. Darmesh Chef alongside me. Darmesh, what can you tell us?
Yeah, this has been a saga throughout this transfer window. Arsenal's pursuit of a striker, and in particular, in the past couple of weeks, the Sporting striker Viktor Gyökeres. There's been all sorts of unsavouriness, if you like, between Sporting and the player himself. He hasn't returned to training. The Sporting president has been very disappointed with Gyökeres' actions. He says if whoever is masterminding this thinks this is going to change my mind about his future, then they're sadly mistaken. But we do believe that there has now been a breakthrough between Arsenal and Sporting over the signing of Viktor Gyökeres. We understand a deal has been agreed in principle whereby Arsenal will pay an initial £55 million plus performance-related add-ons, which we think will add up to around £9 million. So the total deal looks like it is around £64 million to get Viktor Gyökeres from Sporting Lisbon to Arsenal and potentially end this long search that Arsenal have had to bring in a striker to the Emirates. It looks like this one is going to happen. We were suspecting that it would be the case, and there was a lot of posturing from both sides. It should be said Arsenal have been pretty relaxed about the situation. They've looked on and seen the issues that Sporting and Gyökeres have had. Gyökeres believed that he might have had a gentleman's agreement to be able to be sold for a certain price below £60 million. The Sporting president has said, no, that is not the case. He's a Sporting player, and if it doesn't materialise this move, then it's good for us for the next 3 years, the remainder of Gyokeres' contract, but it looks like there has been a breakthrough now, and it looks all the money that the direction of travel is that Viktor Gyökeres will become an Arsenal player. This is turning into some window for Arsenal, isn't it? They brought in Kepa, the number 2 goalkeeper now in competition for David Raya. Martin Zubimendi has joined from Real Sociedad. Christian Norgard has joined from Brentford. Noni Madueke is on the verge of joining from Chelsea. The Viktor Gyökeres deal looks like it is getting very, very close. And add to that, they're still looking at a centre-half, Valencia's Christian Mosquera. And it hasn't been ruled out that Eberiche Eze could yet become an Arsenal player as well. So busy times at Arsenal, but it looks like the hunt for a striker is coming to an end.
Exciting times for Arsenal fans. Darmish, thank you very much for now. And as Darmish just alluded to, Noni Madueke is in London, finalising his move from Chelsea to Arsenal. Madueke has agreed personal terms on a 5-year contract. The deal in principle is there, and he will have a medical.
So, plenty for Amorim to sort out this summer then, which brings us nicely onto a transfer update with James Savundra, who's with me in the studio now. Let's get straight into Rashford. So we're hearing there that he's not there. He's been given extra time to negotiate or organise a move away from the club. What is the latest?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating what Ben was telling us there. 5 players aren't reporting for pre-season duty as United give them time to explore moves away. One of those is Marcus Rashford. Now, Aston Villa turned down the opportunity to sign him permanently for £40 million following what was a largely successful loan spell. Barcelona do remain interested in signing Marcus Rashford. That's after they seemingly missed out on Luis Diaz and Nico Williams, who've just signed a 10-year contract at Athletic Club Bilbao. The reality is that Barcelona, as much as this feels like a great suit for Marcus Rashford, they're going to struggle to register new players without selling them first. In terms of major incomings, it's great to see Matheus Cunha at pre-season training for United today. That's their only major incoming so far. United are expected to go back in with an improved offer for bryanmbeumo. There's a feeling that United's latest proposal, which was rejected, which was worth an additional £55 million, reaching £62.5 million of add-ons, isn't far away from what Brentford are looking for. But I think as far as Brentford are concerned, it's the structure of the deal which is most significant for them. They want at least £65 million. They want to eclipse what Manchester United paid for Matheus Cunha. And you can understand that when you consider the season that bryanmbeumo has just had, 20 Premier League goals. But they want a structure of the deal whereby the majority of the £62.5 to £65 million is guaranteed, not made up of add-ons. And Mbeumo, he only wants to join United, but it was fascinating hearing from the Brentford sporting director, Phil Giles, last week. He told us Mbeumo is happy to stay if a deal cannot be agreed. But I don't think we're too far away. We're talking about £2 or £3 million, I think, in the structure of the deal. I think this will happen. I think United fans may be slightly frustrated. It's taken longer than they wanted, and he's not there this morning at Carrington for pre-season training.
United were at one point quite heavily linked with Viktor Gyökeres, weren't they? But it now looks like he might be heading to Arsenal. So how is that move progressing?
Advanced talks right now, no club-to-club agreement, but we understand that there's a willingness from all parties, in particular Arsenal and Gyökeres, to get a deal done. And Arsenal really encouraged by the fact that it appears like Viktor Gyökeres wants to join, not expecting personal terms to be a problem. He's been given the opportunity to delay his return to pre-season, as we saw with those Manchester United players exploring a move away. He was due back today. He's been given until Friday, but of course, if these talks accelerate and continue to progress, it's unlikely they'll ever see him back at the training ground again. Signing a striker clearly has been the big priority for Arsenal in this transfer window. They've been busy getting the second-choice goalkeeper. They've been busy refreshing that midfield, but it's a striker they're after. It looks like Viktor Gyökeres is the main target right now, and talks are advancing.
Yeah, I think a lot of Arsenal fans will be quite relieved with that news, but until it's over the line, then they won't be too relieved. Arsenal, it sounds like they also want to get another attacking player in, and there's 2 players in particular that they've been heavily linked with of late.
Noni Madueke, that's a really interesting one. Chelsea are expecting an offer from him from Arsenal. We understand he's emerging as one of Arsenal's top targets in this transfer window. Arsenal have looked at a number of players in those wide positions, the likes of Real Madrid's Rodrigo. There hasn't been club-to-club contact between Arsenal and Chelsea yet, but Chelsea are expecting an offer. Really interesting to hear from Enzo Maresca at the weekend. He said any players in his squad who are unhappy are free to leave. The other player that Arsenal are heavily interested in is Ebere Eze at Crystal Palace. He's a top target for Arsenal in this transfer window. He's open to the move as well. He's got a release clause around £60 million, which could rise to £68 million if all conditions and met. As far as Crystal Palace are concerned, they're in a bit of limbo right now. They want to strengthen their squad. They want to keep their best players. That's despite there being uncertainty surrounding their place in the Europa League next season. So I think two players there of real interest to Arsenal as they look to refresh that attacking front line.
Yeah. How about the white half of North London then? I mean, how close, how strong is this interest in Mohamed Kudus that Spurs have?
It's very strong, and he's very, very interested in joining Tottenham. As far as we understand, he only wants to join Tottenham at this moment in time. Spurs remain in talks with West Ham around the signing of Mohamed Kudus. He's not interested in speaking to any other clubs. There is interest from Chelsea as well. We wait to see if they try to accelerate that because they have been very busy already this summer. So Tottenham have had a bid rejected for £50 million, but talks are ongoing, which is encouraging. There is a big gap in where the two clubs are right now in terms of what West Ham want and what Spurs are willing to pay. But the player wants to join. He wants to play in Europe next season. West Ham are expecting an improved offer. Personal terms, we don't think they're going to be an issue. He still has a contract up until 2028 at West Ham, but I think the feeling is if they can get really big money for him in this transfer window, then it gives Graham Potter in his first summer transfer window the opportunity to make a number of signings to really improve the squad and build that squad within his own image.
And finally, one more attacking player that's generating quite a bit of interest at the moment is Anthony Elanga of Nottingham Forest. What's the latest on his potential move away from Forest?
Well, we reported last week on Sky Sports News that Newcastle have made an improved offer of £55 million to sign Elanga from Nottingham Forest. Talks do continue. Now, he's one of Eddie Howe's top targets this summer. He's believed to be intrigued by the project at Newcastle. Newcastle back in the Champions League next season. They're looking to strengthen their attacking options, and he had a brilliant season for Forest last season. At one point, it looked like he could be playing in the Champions League for Forest. Unfortunately, they fell away towards the back end of last season, but talks do continue. It's incredible the rise he's had since leaving Manchester United a couple of years ago. He's had a really good couple of seasons at Nottingham Forest. We wait to see if he takes a step up now to Newcastle. Talks ongoing still.
Win by 4-0 over Real Madrid, continuing their amazing campaign at this Club World Cup. They have only given up one goal at this tournament. That goal was to Botafogo in that group stage defeat. Otherwise, 2-0 win over Bayern Munich, 4-0 win over Real Madrid, 2-0 win over Seattle Sounders, 4-0 win over Atletico Madrid. This is a PSG side that are absolutely dominant. But we want to start by talking about this Real Madrid performance. What do we make of uncharacteristic mistakes? We normally do not see Real Madrid defenders make the silly errors that they did today.
Yeah, listen, Real Madrid are obviously Real Madrid. They're a giant. They were well supported in the stadium today, and it was a massive occasion for them. Obviously, financially, it would have benefited them. I think it was a big occasion, obviously, for Kylian Mbappe. Good to see him in the starting 11, and obviously, the front three. I didn't predict that. I thought we would see one of them miss out. Then Paris Saint-Germain just took it to them. High pressure, and we've seen that from Luis Enrique. When it matters most, put the high pressure on. Obviously, we saw what happened in the kick-off in the Champions League. You remember that, Witty? Booted the ball straight into the corner to get an advantage so you can attack in the right areas. They did that in this game in the opening 10 minutes. But mistakes you simply cannot afford to do. What Asensio did do, ridiculous. It's kind of embarrassing in many ways. Massive occasion. I don't care whether you arrive late by your aircraft arriving late the night before because of weather in the New York area. I don't care if it's your bus arriving late to the stadium, the weather conditions. There's no excuse for these types of mistakes on this level. At this occasion, I think Asensio's put himself in a bit of jeopardy here because Xabi Alonso's looking at every single player and he is grading every single player who he can rely on the big occasion. And I think himself and Rudiger really let themselves down. And there, PSG, they were terrific. We don't want to take anything away from them. But to be 2-0 down 9 minutes into the game, 3-0 down after 24 minutes of the game, they haven't been 3-0 down in, 22 years? At that point, it's absolutely sane in 24 minutes of a game. So, yeah, unacceptable performance from Real Madrid. They were nowhere near at the level they needed to be to compete against one of the most informed sides and clearly in world football right now.
In some ways, is this not a case, though, of PSG, the finished article, versus Real Madrid, the team in progress? Real Madrid obviously are a team. They're never really a team in progress. They're never really a team that rebuilds. But change of manager, change of philosophy, is that kind of what we saw today, that there's still a lot of work for Xabi Alonso to do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're 3-0 down 24 minutes into a game, there's more than a lot of work to do. I think, obviously, the character and the mindset was tested about a lot of the players, and he would have learned a lot about the players that he had at his disposal in this matchup, especially in the opening half of the game. They were absolute rubbish. And especially with shots on goal. They had one shot on goal in the first half. Second half, okay, they tried to a little bit more, but they just couldn't create enough. They had 2 shots on goal in the whole game. So, yeah, creativity-wise, that was the biggest problem. And that's where I was least worried. I thought if you sure go with the hot hand in Gonzalo Garcia, you've got a goal scorer and someone who can create a chance. If you bring Kylian Mbappe in, he's playing against his former club, he's going to be well up for it. Vinny Jr. is going to be well up for it because he's got a point to prove. For me, Vinny's not scoring and assisting enough right now. And in this game, he was ridiculously quiet once again. He had 1 blocked shot. There's no creativity right now with this Real Madrid side. So, yeah, I mean, exactly what you just said there. There is room for improvement. There's a lot of work to be done. But I also think it's a long season for these players. It's kind of crazy to ask them 11 months later to still bring a top-class performance and really play well. But we all expected it, their fans expected it, and it didn't happen for Real Madrid today. They got absolutely humiliated.
We should also note that Trent Alexander-Arnold did not play in the game. Federico Valverde is starting at that right-back position. Trent Alexander-Arnold dealing with a bit of a knock in the build-up to this one. But you mentioned that point about the 11 months and the games and all that, but PSG went all the way in the Champions League. They went to the final and they won it. You talk about the motivation of some of these big European sides at the Club World Cup. Yeah. They are showing no signs of slowing down. And they didn't from the word go. They hammer Atleti on the opening day at the Rose Bowl. And then they all the way through to the semifinal have performed as good as we see them every single week in Champions League, in Liga. This PSG side is unerring in their brilliance.
Yeah, but also please don't ever forget the fact that PSG did not start their campaign back in, 24-25 season, August last year, well. They were kind of slow off the races. They got an injury to Gonzalo Ramos. They then had a fallout with Ousmane Dembele, and players were rotating in and out of the team. What impresses me most is the fact that there was incredible rotation even when the team wasn't playing well. Some youngsters came into the team, especially in that first 6-month period, and then all of a sudden they started to really hit full cylinder. They were absolutely at it from January onwards. In many ways, it's down to the fact that Kvara came into the team, and obviously you've called many of his games. He's one playmaker and one dangerous player that many defenses will have problems with, and he has the potential, in my opinion, to win Ballon d'Or at some stage. He's that good. He's that dangerous. But then you've got Doué, who impressed us in the Champions League, and Ousmane Dembele, who's scoring more goals than anyone else in calendar year 2025. They are hitting form at the right time. And it's not just the Champions League. You remember, we've all been laughing at them. I've certainly been guilty of it. PSG can't get over the finish line. You know, and I, at one point in my career, worked for their owner, Nasser El Khalifi, and I know his demand is to win, to be successful, but also to do it in a pleasing on the eye style. He has got the right man in charge, and they are playing football at the right moment. Best team in Europe, they might just be the best team in the world right now.
And it's so interesting how that narrative changes. It goes from, as you say, absolutely, the team that were laughed at in major European football.
What do you think that was, Chris? What do you think the change was going from the first 6 months to then eventually the team that we're seeing now?
Well, I think the change within this season comes down to finally figuring out the solution, which was, for me, Dembele going in at center forward. And you see all the changes that fit around it. The pieces start to fit in this team. They really don't have to play with a center forward for them to be effective. I think in the overall, the sort of big strategy is, first off, they've spent a lot of money, but they spent the money now on talented, young French players that fit Luis Enrique's system and that know where they're going, as opposed to spending it on the biggest name and the biggest stars possible. Neymar, Messi, Mbappe. Mbappe obviously was a brilliant player and a young star at the same time, but you're not figuring out how to build your team around the stars. You're figuring out what the collective is first and how the pieces fit therein. And I think we're now seeing a team that goes from the laughingstock to now, I think, going into next season, anyone that's playing them in a major game, in a big competition, is fearing what PSG, just don't hurt us. Don't hit us too hard.
Listen, they got numbers in advance to be able to rotate as much as they possibly can. They will rest players going into the beginning of their domestic season. You can't help but look at the fact that they're cleaning up domestically. So they don't necessarily need to play their best team every single week to win that domestic title. Rotation has been awesome. Do they have the 2 best fullbacks in world football? Hakimi, what he's doing, assisting and scoring. Mendes on that left-hand side, or Minge to you when you're commentating the game. And then in midfield, it might be the best midfield that we are watching in world football right now. Many people can debate that. Come at me if you will. But Paris Saint-Germain are checking every single box. But this is ridiculous with you. You must have enjoyed calling that midfield this season.
God, to me, Fabian Ruiz is the player that doesn't get enough credit. Vitinha, an unbelievable development as a player. João Neves this season has been terrific. But Fabian Ruiz, for me, is kind of the unsung part of both the PSG team and the Spain team. There, for me, is no coincidence that he is in the best national team and the best club team in the world. world.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't get anywhere near that credit. Now that he's starting to score some goals, he just might.
You know, you pointed out the fact that they were rotating their team, and it's a young team. They're not frightened to also go and add the player that they need that might complete the puzzle. They go out and get Kvaratskhelia, which to me was an unreal piece of business. How on earth did you manage to convince him to go there? First and foremost, Paris is an awesome city, but you're playing in French football. Now you're European champions, probably because of him. But Luis Enrique has proved us that he is a brave man. Kylian Mbappe's out the door. He also managed to get some success from Bradley Barcola. And then, of course, Doué comes in the door, and all of a sudden you've got this rotation of youngsters who are eager to get into the starting 11. He is creating a battle to play for his team. They're all happy. They're all fresh because of that rotation. Man, next season, they might go ahead and win yet again another completion of the treble. They're just so good.
They are European champions, but they are not yet world champions.
Story now, Chelsea have been crowned Club World Cup champions. Cole Palmer scored twice as they beat Paris Saint-Germain 3-0 at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey to win an estimated £111 million in prize money. It's a second trophy for Enzo Maresca in his first season at Chelsea, after he also guided the club to the Europa Conference League back in May. Palmer scored twice in 8 first-half minutes to put Chelsea 2-0 up. He was involved again a bit later as he laid on an assist for João Pedro to make it 3-0 before half-time. Robert Sanchez made a few crucial saves to preserve Chelsea's lead. PSG's João Neves was sent off late on for pulling Marc Cucurella's hair as it finished 3-0. Tempers continued to boil over at full time. PSG goalkeeper Gianluigi Donnarumma appeared to be involved in an altercation with João Pedro on the pitch, which led to a brawl between both sets of players.
OK, but we are going to start with some breaking news coming out of Spain, where police have issued an update following the road traffic accident which killed Liverpool forward Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. Football correspondent Rob Dorset joins us now. So, Rob, look, what's happened today?
OK, so look, we've had an update from the Spanish police that are investigating exactly what happened in this accident which killed the Liverpool striker Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. And so we have to deal with this pretty sensitively, I think, because there's an awful lot of people in this country, in Spain, in Portugal, all around the world who are still mourning the tragic loss of Diogo Jota in this case. But of course, the Spanish authorities have to continue with their investigations. Yeah. And this is the first formal statement we've had from them since the crash, pointing to maybe some of the circumstances around it. So this is a statement from the Zamora Civil Guard. They've indicated that they think that Jota himself was the man who was driving the car. Here you go, you can see it now. The expert report is being prepared and finalised. I think that's important to stress. This is not the final conclusion here. They're still investigating. Among other things, the marks left by one of the vehicle's wheels are being examined. Don't really understand that. That's pretty technical. But that last bit is significant, I think. Everything also points to the vehicle significantly exceeding the speed limit for the highway. All of the evidence so far indicates that the driver of the crashed vehicle was Diogo Jota himself. The expert report is not yet complete, but as it is subject to a judicial review, it will be submitted to the Puebla de Sanabria court. So if you take the important bits out of that, I think you have to stress that this is a preliminary statement from the police. Yep. It is not the final report by any means. It seems to suggest their belief on what they've looked at so far, that Jota was driving the car when it crashed. And crucially, that's that quote, everything points to the vehicle significantly exceeding the speed limit for the highway. It's not full, it's not finalised, it's not finished. But it's a significant start in explaining exactly what happened to cause the tragic death of these two men.
And the reason that he was driving the car is because he was advised, wasn't he, in terms of his injury?
That's right. He'd had some lung issues, apparently, and so it sounds like the football club had encouraged him not to fly back for pre-season training. So our understanding is that Diogo Jota was actually driving back to catch a ferry back to England in his car when it crashed and he sadly lost his life. His plan was to come and rejoin Liverpool training, pre-season training. Now, following the funeral on Saturday, We know that Liverpool postponed the first day of pre-season training. Nobody went back on Monday. But they have, I think, come back today with 1 or 2 absences as well. Liverpool have tried to be as sensitive as they possibly can in this situation, and they've left a lot of the decisions to the individual players themselves. I mean, I think the headline said that any of the Spanish players or Portuguese players that knew him very, very well didn't have to return for training immediately. They could take some time to kind of try and compute all that's happened to their very close friend and teammate. I think Liverpool have applied that to all of the players. If they didn't feel ready to come back, there's no way that Liverpool would force those players to come back. But we've seen some of the tributes that the squad have been laying at Liverpool's training ground this morning when they have returned for pre-season training, and some of the supporters that have laid flowers and tributes as well. And that's why I think we have to, the pictures you're looking at there are of the funeral itself, of course, which happened on Saturday back in his home country. But I think that's why we have to be very careful in how we give you this very newsy update right now.
Yeah, I agree.
We have to be aware that people are still suffering, an awful lot of people are still suffering, and that's not just Liverpool supporters. And I think the Spanish police will be aware of that as well in issuing this update.
Yes.
It's not a full update. It stresses that there is still an lot more that they need to investigate and finalise and determine before they bring out an official report concluding what's happened. And it's my understanding there's more than one investigation happening into this crash. There's more than one body in Spain that is carrying out various investigations into exactly what happened. This is just one of them.
Yeah.
It's clearly an important one. It's a formal one. It's the Zamora Civil Guard who've been looking at this, an official body out in Spain. But just to recap those 2 key issues that they've made today, which I think are the crux of their statement, even though their investigations are ongoing, they say they believe it was Diogo Jota himself who was driving the car when it crashed, not his brother Andre Silva. But crucially, quote, they say everything points to the vehicle significantly exceeding the speed limit for the highway. More details from Spain as soon as we get it.
Yeah, just finally, you mentioned as well today, you know, obviously it's incredibly sensitive, and it is such an emotional thing for all these players that are potentially returning to pre-season, of which we've seen some of them returning to Liverpool today. And it is that whole case of some of them will want to go back to actually get back in a group and actually try to process what's happened, because they're going to have to somehow take to the field and play a game of football.
As a team.
And that actually probably seems very, very irrelevant and insignificant.
As a team, without one of their closest teammates. And I don't think you can put into words how difficult that will be for the Liverpool squad. Of course, there were some players in that squad who were much closer to him than others. But I think what we've seen over the last few days is a united feeling of loss around that football club. I mean, Liverpool Football Club has a history of tragedy surrounding it. It's had some horrific incidents to deal with over its history. This is the latest of them, and it's one that I think will be felt very, very pertinently by the players themselves. And so that's why I think it was probably a very sombre atmosphere and probably an important opportunity for Liverpool's players to get back today to the training ground to spend some time together. They've probably been mourning
that's what's
on their
greeting
own.
them right now. You know, when they walk into the AXA training centre, you know, that's not normal.
And we've seen similar tributes, even bigger tributes at Anfield, of course, haven't we?
Yeah.
And where the accident happened, and his hometown in Portugal as well. So there are reminders everywhere people go of the tragic loss of Diogo Jota and just how loved he was. None least of those at Liverpool's training ground. So I think the Liverpool players and Liverpool officials will hear this news that we're bringing to you now about this statement from the Zamora Civil Guard. And I don't know how it will impact them, is the honest truth. They'll have to digest it. It's not a final report, but it's a bit more detail about how their friend and teammate died. And however we deliver that, it's going to be difficult for them to receive, I think.